Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Barbara Miller from Museum of the Moving Image. I'm so glad to be with you. These past few weeks, we've been bringing you a series we call Jim Henson's World Conversations. These conversations explore Jim Henson's remarkable body of work and the incredible creative team who brought his stories and characters to life and his enduring legacy. Tonight, we will be exploring something new, Fraggle Rock, Rock On, an Apple TV Plus series produced by the Jim Henson Company. There's so much to talk about. But before we bring on our fantastic guests, just a little bit of housekeeping to share with you. We really look forward to welcoming you to Museum of the Moving Image, MoMI, in person when we reopen. And in the meantime, we'll continue to bring you events like this one, along with a lot of other great content, including virtual cinema offerings, education programs, Sloan Science on Screen, our online publication Reverse Shot, and so much more. Please go over to our website, movingimage.us. There's a lot going on. Some of you who are watching are members. Hello, members. And those of you who aren't, you can please consider joining our community. There's always a lot happening, and there's a lot of great community member benefits. As you know, this event is free, but we sincerely hope you'll make a donation to the museum in whatever amount you are able to, so we can continue bringing you events like this one, in addition to having the support that we need to open our doors, hopefully very, very soon. Another few things, few housekeeping things, please feel free to use the Q&A feature on the screen to pose questions. Karen Falk, the archives director at the Jim Henson Company, has graciously agreed to once again be behind the scenes answering some of your questions directly, and some of them she will be sending over to me, so we will pose those questions to our guests and they will answer them on the air. So I'm going to give a little introduction to all of the guests that are with us tonight. I am very pleased to introduce them. They are Dave Goelz, puppeteer of so many beloved characters, including Gonzo the Great, Zoot, Benson Honeydew, Uncle Traveling Matt, and Boober Fraggle. Karen Prell, who has performed various characters on Sesame Street throughout the years, and perhaps most famously is known for her performance as Red Fraggle on Fraggle Rock, and now on Fraggle Rock Rocks On. And Karen is also an accomplished animator. Halle Stanford has been working as a producer with the Jim Henson Company since 1993, where she is now president of television, which is, I think, the best title I've ever heard. And she serves as executive producer for Fraggle Rock, Rock On. John Tartaglia began puppeteering on Sesame Street when he was just a teenager and has performed off-Broadway in Avenue Q, on Broadway in Shrek the Musical and Beauty and the Beast, created the Jim Henson Company show Splash and Bubbles for PBS. John is an executive producer of Fraggle Rock, Rock On, and performs Gobo Fraggle, and does a whole lot of other things from his home, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So without further ado, please welcome all of those amazing people that I just told you about. I'd like to invite all of them to come onto the screen and join me. So
hello,
exciting.
Hi, everybody.
Hey!
So
Woo!
great.
Oh, silly creatures from all over the world.
So we're talking about a new Fraggle show. After all these years, it's very, very exciting. Listen, we have a really big audience tonight. I think that speaks to the hunger for Fraggle Rock out in the world and how much love there is for these characters and for this show. It's been a long time coming. So I want to hear from you all about you know, how this new iteration was brought to life. It was inspired by and conceived specifically for these enforced distance conditions. So how did all that happen?
Well, maybe I'll kick it off and then I'll throw it to you guys, my heroes. I still get giddy being here. I've worked for the company 27 years, and being with Karen, John, and Dave is still every day a dream come true. So, but how it happened was, you know, at Henson, when this all happened and we all shut down and came inside, we think about kids and families a lot and what we can do for them and service them. So we were brainstorming, what should we do? We had ideas about immediate needs. And it was like the universe conspired to make this happen, because then Apple, Tara Sorensen at Apple called me and said, Jamie Ehrlich is wondering if you'd be interested in bringing back Fraggle Rock and doing shorts to help inspire families at home. And I was like, are you kidding me? Yes. Like, I couldn't imagine anything more exciting than having the Fraggles come and speak to everybody. It was so joyful. So of course, when I called my partner in crime, John Tartaglia, with Tartaglia, when I told him that we could do this, we were super excited about what we could design.
And I had brought the Fraggles home. So when the Henson lot got shut down, the Fraggles had been in my office. And I called Halle that day, and I was like, and this is before we got the call from Apple, and I said, should I bring the Fraggles home with me? I just don't feel like I can leave these beautiful legendary puppets sitting alone in an office for who knows how long. And she was like, yeah, bring them home. And lo and behold, when we got the call from Apple, Halle was like, you brought the puppets home. Thank God we have the puppets.
We gotta make something. We figured out how to there's a lot that went into the production of it. How do you design this to shoot safely in quarantine and all of that? But we also needed to creatively reverse engineer, like, what do families need to hear right now from the Fraggles? They need to hear about, we're all connected, even if we're apart. Maybe some families need some inspiration. So you'll see, like, there's one episode where there's a talent show. So we thought, well, that could be fun to inspire families to do that. And then just the idea of Uncle Traveling Matt. I mean, Dave and John, you should talk about it, and how he's perceiving what's going on out in the world in a humorous way, in a light way, as opposed to a heavy way. It was really fun too. So you can see in each one, we're kind of sending a message of things you can do with your family, sing and keep up your spirits, dance your cares away. But it was definitely a challenge, but exciting.
It is a really tough needle to thread. I mean, here are these beloved characters coming on and addressing this issue that we're all dealing with, and trying to, bring some light and some love to the world. But still, it's very much kind of within this moment. But John and Dave and Karen, be great to hear from you about how the show is produced. This is not your how ordinary, how you're accustomed to working on sets, and it has meant a lot of changes to your typical workflows. So it would be great to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a whole new paradigm. We're all at home. Everybody is at home. Editors, directors, producers, and there's no facility, there's no studio to go to. So we have to figure out how to do it from home, and it's a challenge for, I think, every single person on the production. I do have to say that this group that we did this with, and you're missing a lot of them because they're not on camera right now, but this group was just extraordinary and an absolute joy to work with.
Yeah, and in some ways it was using incredibly new technology. Everything was shot on iPhone 11s. Thank you, Apple. Those were amazing to have. It was like receiving a Christmas gift. But then also kind of old school too, because as you can see, like with Karen right now, she's in front of her blue screen. On the original series, a lot of Fraggle Rock was shot with blue screen. And so we got a chance to kind of do that too. So we kind of blended those two worlds together. And, it's amazing what we found, I think, was that technology is the reason we could make this, and how inventive you can be when you just have to do it this way.
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit because I remember.
I did it with an iPhone 6.
Laughing, Johnny, because I'm remembering when I called you once at night and you were making like rocks in your kitchen. You're like, I'm making rocks and I'm painting them. Like, it was like everybody pitched in a way they haven't done since we were all in like little kids in the backyard putting on shows. It was pretty great.
It looks like maybe that is the kitchen. Is that right?
That is my kitchen. Yes, that's from the Traveling Matt segment that we shot, and that was about 1:45 in the morning. But you could see like the ring lights, and you could see the tripod on the left there, which is where the iPhone 11 would sit. And I don't know if you can see, but the very, very bottom of the screen, there's like a hint of a blanket and a comforter. I felt so bad because if you've seen the episode, Traveling Matt slams into the counter and dishes go flying. Yes. And I thought my poor downstairs neighbor is gonna hate me. So I was like putting down like 7 blankets so like when that stuff fell. But that's what you did. What you have to do. That's what you do. You make it happen.
Let's see some more of these great pictures.
Oh no.
Oh, yes.
So,
In his bathtub.
can you tell us what's going on there a little bit?
Well, so this is interesting. So actually, you were asking about how we did things. So Dave is, Dave and I aren't near each other. And what Dave would do is he would record his lines as Boober and Traveling Matt and send them to me, and I would puppeteer for him.
Let me explain the reason for that.
Yeah.
In the early part of the sheltering at home, the Muppets sent me some puppets. They sent me a box of puppets, which I was terrified to touch. So I washed the whole thing with bleach and put it in my garage for 3.5 weeks. Didn't touch it. And during that time, Henson called and said, would you like some Fraggles? And I said, no more puppets, no more puppets. So I'm scared of them. And so for that reason, I just did the voice from home, and Johnny did Matt and Boober for me, which
it was a huge, well, thank you. I mean, it was an honor to be trusted with that. And I had so much fun shooting that. And actually, so what this is my dog, my partner's and my dog, Rocky. There's a point in the segment where he kisses Traveling Matt on the nose. And what's so funny, and that's also about 1:30 in the morning, laying in the bathtub. And my wonderful boyfriend who was holding the camera was like, get your knees down further, your knees down further. And I'm like, I can't get any smaller. But it was so funny because it's like, we wrote that, we all laughed at that script. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, I was like, oh, I have to film this now. Like, it wasn't some fantasy that some production somewhere was going to do. I was like, oh, I have to shoot this in my home now.
So
but
how does that work exactly? Because there's no director there, and you're doing all the puppeteering, and there's dogs and cats and props and all of that. So how does that work? You alone in your house with an iPhone 11?
Well, we had the most amazing director. His name is Jason DeVilliers, and the process, just so everyone kind of knows, is we would I would write the scripts working with everybody to put the characters and the segments together and talk about what we wanted it to be. And Harvey Mason Jr., our amazing music producer, would oftentimes produce music tracks. And then we have kind of a virtual production meeting where all of us would get on the phone, Halle, Lisa Henson, myself, Dave, Tim, Karen, the whole gang. We'd all get on the phone with Jason, our director, and we'd read the script and tweak that. And then we'd kind of talk about how we're going to shoot it. And it was a challenge because, Donna Kimball, who's been playing Moki, is here in LA, and I'm here in LA, but we're separated. Karen's up north, Dave's up north. Frankie, who's doing Wembley right now, is in Chicago, but I have his puppet. So we just try to figure out with Jason what's the best way to accomplish all of this.
We had a DP as well, and we had our
amazing
editor.
DP.
So you had all of the team there sort of guiding the puppeteers, like, set your phones at this setting. Let me take a look at the picture of the lighting. We'd read it through. These are the things we want to see. If one of the performers said, can I try something like this? Donna Kimball playing Moki. Can I try this one yoga pose? Yeah, try it that way, but also do it this way. So all those things had to be set up ahead of time. But I do want to do a little shout out to Dave and Johnny too, when they were collaborating on Boober and Traveling Matt. It was incredible to watch because on Zoom, I really loved how we were all there together going over the read-throughs and workshopping the scripts together. It was pretty remarkable. Dave's right, it was extraordinary. Everybody was there and listening to each other and trying to make it better and funnier and to keep it short.
And it was fun because then it was like, go off and make it.
Yeah.
Imagine shooting something like this and the director can't see the shot.
Yeah.
Because the shot is in an iPhone in somebody's house and the director can't actually see exactly what's being done.
Dave, I wanted to ask you a question about the voice because, as your typical way of performing is to puppeteer and do the voice at the same time. It's a much more embodied kind of relationship with your character. So is this what was it like for you to be performing these characters but not being able to physically control them?
Well, it was not a problem at all. I was just working on the scripts and trying to get the characters working and working with Johnny on that, and then recording it, doing some takes and picking one. And then I was very confident that Johnny would do a spectacular job performing, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Easy.
Well, and it was a lot of trust. I mean, like when you have amazing talent like Karen Prell, who's going to go off and, she knows red better than anybody does. So there was so much trust there of just kind of like, we'd all kind of, it was almost like a football huddle, I guess is like the Zoom calls, like a football huddle. And we'd all be like, you got this, you got this, you got that, you got that. Great, go, break.
Yeah, break, go.
And we during the preliminary Zoom calls, we reading through the script, we'd have the puppets with us and kind of, you know, workshop some things. And when Red had to have rigs, like a few shows ago, she was pumping granite, and so I had like a mocked up something to see if it was even going to be doable. It was like, yeah, I think I could do it. So we kind of got all those, as much as possible, figured out in advance. And now this image here, so this is that blue screen is what's behind me right now. And I'm shooting this in a little studio condo. Behind the blue screen is my bed. And then off to my left is my office, and off to my right is my kitchen. Straight ahead is like bookshelves and chair, and it's just really, really tight space. They sent us the ring lights and the screens, and then our DP walked us through setting up the lights, and our sound guy walked us through setting up the microphones. So they, you know, everybody was jumping in to help us all get set up. And
it was a true team.
Yes, it was such a wonderful team. It really reminded me on the original series, there was so much groundbreaking, fun, challenging stuff. We were helping each other figure out and accomplish. And so much of this production reminded me of that. You know, lots of challenges, but everybody just jumping in there and trying stuff and having fun doing it.
You know, it really reminds me so much of, you know, how in Jim Henson's work, there was always this sense of, you know, taking on new technology and seeing what it could do, and seeing a problem and finding a creative answer to it. I mean, that's a theme that just runs consistently throughout his career. And here you are in this moment, making this show in that same context. It's just, it's kind of amazing and really just very inspiring.
Oh, you know, we felt his spirit there too when we did the piece with Common singing "Let Me Be Your Song." I think that all really moved all of us so much that it was Jim's song, Cantus's song, and it was cool. It was, we were putting it out there, and I think we were all so moved by that to be able to do that. And I think it came out well.
Yes, and
Karen, Johnny, do you like it?
I loved how the song was updated and expanded on, and just took what was already there and just multiplied it to make it so wonderful.
Well, you know, I will say those celebrities were so common. He wants to be called Common Fraggle now. He's like, I am Common Fraggle.
It's true.
Tiffany Haddish showed up, and you'll see her. She was like fully into Red, and Neil Patrick Harris with Boober. Everybody really loved being there. Jason Mraz, like, I got to tell you, it just felt so good.
Let's talk a little bit about music, because obviously music was a big part of the original series. So I'm just wondering how, when you were conceiving how this was going, what this was going to be, how much did music factor into that?
Johnny, you got to talk about it. Go.
Well, big time. I mean, as a kid growing up, you know, wanting to be a puppeteer because of Fraggle Rock, I had all the albums. I knew those songs, you know, backwards and forwards. And, you know, the first thing we talked about, I think probably the very first thing we talked about when Apple called was, do we want this to be musical? And everyone agreed it had to be to some degree. And what we would do sometimes in the case of like a Common or Jason Mraz is we would say, hey, here's what we think the theme of this episode would be great to be about. Here are a few songs to look at that kind of fit that theme. Which one of these reads to you? Kind of secretly hoping maybe I would pick the one that we're hoping for, and it always works out that way somehow. And it was really wonderful. And I think, you know, we just wanted to make sure that we honored the original, but also, you know, brought it to a 2020 sound. And Common and Jason and all, they were so collaborative, and they wanted to really, I think what I admire so much about all the celebrities we worked with is their incredible reverence for the original and their respect for what was already there. And you know, like Alanis Morissette saying, I don't have to do a whole lot because the song is already amazing. She's like, I'm just going to put my stuff onto it. She's like, but this song is genius. Like, it's to hear these people that we look to as musical geniuses say how much they admire the Fraggle music written by Philip Balsam and Dennis Lee, you know, who I think are heroes, and how they wrote.
It's worth talking a little bit about those two guys too.
Oh, yeah.
They worked in an unusual way. Dennis would write the music first. He would do a demo with his guitar, and his singing voice was incredible. So you heard his little demos that he made at home that were just stunning sounding things, but they were just music. And then he sent that over to I'm sorry, not Dennis. Phil wrote those at home. He sent them over to Dennis, and Dennis added lyrics after the fact, after the music was already structured, which is a little bit unusual. Not everybody does it that way. And they did such a gorgeous job. We did 96 shows, and I think there are about 3 songs per show. They wrote almost every single one. And they are just gorgeous songs from all genres. They're just beautiful. And Dennis later became the poet laureate of Canada. You know, that's how good a lyricist he was. So that body of work is something I'm really, really proud of, along with Fraggle Rock too. It's one of my favorite projects ever.
It's actually hard to find, to narrow down songs, because it's like everyone, there's not one clunker. Every single one of them are so good. And, and you're like, it almost is embarrassing. It was like, I'd like to narrow this down, but I'm not sure we can. Because it's so
everybody know that John Tartaglia is a walking Fraggle Rock music library. When he's like, pick out 3 songs, he'd be like, okay, here are 5 songs I know, and this one theme that could work for Jason Mraz. Here are these right here that could work for Ziggy Marley, and this one right here, and this one. Like, you know those songs, Joni. And you worked with Harvey Mason Jr., and you guys were a great team on this.
We had a lot of fun.
It's been hard. Each episode is so short, and there's only 6 of them, right? There's 6 people, so that if my math is correct, that's 30 minutes of Fraggle. That's
one episode.
Not enough. It's definitely not enough. I think it would be really interesting to talk about this new show in the context of where it came from, in you know, a little bit more detail. And here's an image you may recognize, Dave, from back in the day when you were actually puppeteering Uncle Traveling Matt, in addition to doing his voice. So there's a continuity. Obviously, this is not a completely reinvented universe. It's an adapted.
Well, I'll tell you also that particular episode, it was the very first Traveling Matt we shot. And in the background is VTR Productions, which is where we shot the show. And let's see, I don't know if you might want to unshare for just a second, because I'll throw this in. Yeah. When we wrapped the show, the sets were, one of the sets was sort of torn apart and made into a little piece of the rock. Let me get a reflection.
That's so cool.
And it's the loveliest little thing. So this little thing is on my shelf.
And you made a bunch of those and sent them to everybody. I've got one.
I'm getting into it. And then years later, I went back to Toronto, and I noticed that building, VTR Productions, was just a pile of rubble. It had been knocked down. It's now part of a Four Seasons hotel that sits right on this spot. And this is the thing that I picked up some of the bricks, little pieces of brick, and I sent them to all the performers.
Oh my gosh!
Amazing.
Had this thing made, and then on the bottom, let's see, it's upside down. It says, you know, there's a little message to everybody. I think I sent one to Karen, all the other puppeteers.
That's so cool.
That's an actual rock that was in that. I mean, a brick that was in that building.
Yep.
So there obviously there was a sense that you were doing something really special when you were making the original series as well. Can Karen, you or Dave say a little bit about the genesis of that show and kind of what it grew out of, how it grew out of Jim Henson's group?
I have to throw something in over that last slide. If you go back just to that thing. Yeah. Sorry, one more thing, and then I'll leave. Right there, you see those blue panels on the wall on the left side of that building, white building with blue panels. That literally is the corner of the Four Seasons Hotel, and it's all covered in black granite. And at the spot there where you would enter the studio, Larry Merkin, our producer, had the idea that we should put a Fraggle hole there, and that we should get the cooperation of the hotel, and there should be a little tiny Fraggle hole with a plaque that says that this is where Fraggle Rock was shot, and it would be the like a hole going into Fraggle Rock. He pursued it for a while. It didn't actually get going, and he's got busy with other things, so it hasn't happened yet. But maybe we could start a movement and get that.
Yeah.
There we
Yeah.
go.
I'm up for that. Everyone who's
Okay.
watching, right into the Four Seasons.
Competition,
Okay.
for sure.
And anybody in Toronto, if you go to that Four Seasons, there's that circular driveway with a fountain in the middle of it. And I think that fountain is about where the Fraggle Rock in the Gorg's Garden was when we were shooting.
That's so cool.
So people in Toronto, that's Ghosts of Fraggle Pass there.
So
Well, what I loved about the original production was just the way Jim was able to bring together just so many amazingly talented people and just leave them alone to do what he picked them to do. He trusted people. There would be, meetings and plans and things, and then he was off doing all his other Jim things, and just let us grow and develop the force of this show ourselves, just from this recipe that Jim left with us.
yeah, so it was kind of from what I understand, the first production that was kind of independent of Jim being involved in day to day, and there were others that were kind of helming that. Is that right?
I was kind of the new kid on the block at that time. Dave probably knows more about that.
Oh yeah, but Jim asked me not to tell you, so that's a secret. No, actually, it was an extraordinary watershed moment for all of us who weren't Jim and Frank, because Jim and Frank tended up to that point to be the stars, the top stars, and they also tended to do the publicity. So their work was known, their characters got known very well, and the rest of us didn't do any of that, or we did very little of it. All of a sudden, he just took the ceiling off. Frank was off directing films, and Jim just said, "Okay, go." And so we started doing more publicity, and we started growing as performers and writers and, workshop people. Everybody got to grow. And that was, again, due to the fact that Jim just trusted us.
Yeah.
And the puppeteers working with the writers, we would be on script meetings and really exploring what we wanted to accomplish for our characters in the scripts. That was an amazing opportunity, and all the performers, we all work together as equals, we're treated as equals, and I was very young working with my heroes, but it was just all we were just all in this very, very equal basis, appreciating and supporting each other. And what we had together is kind of the core Henson creative people also just expanded out to the whole crew. We shot this with a lot of Canadian crew and Canadian puppeteers, and just that feeling just spread out to everybody. Everybody loved working with each other and supporting each other and suggesting ideas and just trying to make everything the best it could be. Just everybody focusing towards the best idea, no matter who it came from or why, but just we all wanted to make the best thing work for the sake of the show.
Larry Merkin put it really well. He just said, we're all working in service of the best idea. Yep. And it's really true. If you're in love with your idea and somebody has a better one, what can you say? It's better, we have to do that. And it's a wonderful way to collaborate. We always have had a relationship between our characters and the crew in the studio. Wembley used to think that our switcher in the control room, Halle Walker, was God. Yes. And Halle would put a little lightning bolt would flash over Wembley's head. And Boober, we used to have religious debates with Wembley. He believed that Gordy Luker was the God because he was out of light, and Gordy Luker did all the lighting. And so we always have involved everybody in the room. And of course, Jim would always listen to anybody's suggestions. So anybody working there, regardless of what their job was, could come up to Jim and say, I have an idea. What if Wembley did such and such? And Jim would stop and talk to him for 5 minutes about it. And whether or not he did it, he always treated everybody with respect. If it was a good idea, he used it. And everybody felt that they were really a part of it, which they were.
Yeah. I'll give a shout out to Michael Frith, who is instrumental in developing the show.
Michael Frith.
Hi, Michael.
And Jocelyn as well, who
Jocelyn.
all the writers.
Jocelyn and Michael and Duncan Kenworthy created the sort of world over time before we got to Toronto, and did a book about it.
Actually, I'm going to skip ahead and show this. Can you all see this? So this is from this document that that they had collaborated on, that sort of came out of this brainstorming of what Fraggle Rock was going to be. So this is a list of themes, parallels, and connections that that help sort of guide the Fraggle universe. And this is leading me into a question about this idea of canon, right? So when we were preparing for this event, that word canon came up. And I think that it's used in the context of kind of maintaining the integrity of a world or a set of characters, right? Like what is appropriate to hold on to? How do you keep it, itself? How do you keep the integrity of a world together? So John, that must have been interesting and challenging for you to come onto this and to stay within that. So what kinds of resources did you work with to make sure that stayed together?
Well, I just want to say I agree with you, and I think I'm a big believer that if you're gonna revisit something or reimagine something or reboot something, whatever the term is you want to use, you have to look at the reason why it was probably successful to begin with. And I think it's always foolish when people try to reimagine something and throw that out the door. To me, this is a show that is so beloved, and so I am the biggest Fraggle Rock fan. And so I know the things that are, influenced me watching it growing up and the things that matter to me. And so I think you want to respect what's come before and the reason it was there, and then say, okay, but, and now with great respect, let's look at how it applies to today. Audiences absorb information differently today. Media works differently today. Kids' attention spans are different today. But there was a great respect. Halle, especially, and Lisa Henson, and everyone from the Joensa company, everyone felt like, okay, we have to handle this with as much love and as much care, and take what already works, which is so much of it, and now just get a chance to revisit it again. So it was really, it was I think what Dave and Karen were saying before, it was collaboration. It's actually really heartwarming to hear Dave and Karen talk so much about the original production in that way, because that is what we try to do, was try to go, like, when we would write these new scripts, we would want to stay true to the characters and then listen to everybody's suggestions on how to make it better and how to make it stronger. And if Dave and Karen wonderfully would say, well, it'd be great if Traveling Matt did da, 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 I'd be like, great. Like, there's that sense of, I don't know, Jocelyn Stevenson has this great quote I've read somewhere where she says that, we were just waiting to discover things. So instead of it being, I came up with something, it was almost like, oh, it's always been there, I just discovered it. And I think that there is something about the show that's true. It's like, it just felt right that Traveling Matt would get kissed by a dog and think that a bathtub was a comfortable place to sleep. It's like, I would love to say that there was some brilliant meeting about that, but it just came out, So I don't know. I think it's just about respecting what's come before and handling it with as much love as possible, and then kind of saying, what are some new ways to go to explore these characters in these situations? And obviously, because we can't be together, you can't show the Fraggle Five hanging out at the pond right now. So what would they do if they were in their caves alone? And I think that opened up a whole new world of who these characters are.
John,
I hope I answered that.
I will also say that having helped guide Dark Crystal and even these Fraggle shorts, like pre-established franchises that already exist, you do have to be true to canon, what the love is, but also if you're going to push and evolve them a bit, then you go from a place of truth and you just kind of sprout it over here. So the Doozer tubes was something unique and new to the short.
Your tubes.
Yeah, and so, we thought, okay, there's got to be a different way that they're communicating. Oh, there it is.
Doozer tubes.
Very good. Doozer tubes. Built by Halle who?
Yes.
cheap doozer.
Yes,
And
they're
so we
beautiful.
thought, well, the doozers, technology is their game. And so what if the doozers had engineered a way for them to communicate? But then we also decided, let's not hit it too on the nose. This isn't a Zoom call. They're not looking at a computer. They're not seeing each other, they're hearing each other. So we didn't take the technology too far, but far enough that we thought, oh, this will be fun. And it's playful to the Fraggles that they would want to play with this and hear each other. So little tiny shifts that we did in the shorts, little shifts.
Well, it's interesting because we came to Fraggle Rock on the tail of the Muppet Show, and that was a little unprecedented because the characters were presented as performers who had a life outside the show. Therefore, they could go on the Today Show to do publicity. And when we did Fraggle, those characters were considered residents of a world that was not connected to ours. They didn't see us, we didn't see them ever. And so we didn't do any publicity with the Fraggles, except Matt a little bit because he was already out in the world. But he was very unaware of what he was doing when he was doing publicity. So it's evolved a little bit from there, but it's all very intentional. And I guess I'm coming off of what Barbara's question was originally, which was about canon.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I wanted to touch on what Johnny was saying about collaboration, and that was that the environment we worked in was very different than today's Hollywood showrunner culture, where writers create a show and they hire actors to do the parts, and the actors can't go to the writing room, and it's all very regimented. Ours was nothing like that. We all of us would drop by the writer's room to talk about upcoming shows. If it featured our character, we might go to meetings, story meetings, 2 or 3 weeks before we shoot, just to talk about, ideas for that particular episode. And it was really, really a joy. I mean, it just made the whole show better.
There's something very Henson Company about that, I think, because I'm thinking as you say that, Dave, about like all the different productions I've gotten to work on through the years with Henson, and I think of Sesame Street or Word Party with Halle and Julie's Green Room, and it was always like that. Like the performers have always had this beautiful invitation with the writers to collaborate, and I think that's that had to have been established by Jim, I guess, it's
And we had, in that particular instance, we had a different writer for every show. So a writer would do all the drafts and keep the show all the way through. And when we shot the show, they would be there for the shoot. And they were there to solve problems, last minute script issues. And again, it was terrific because they got to know us because they were there seeing us work. They got to know the characters. It all just tumbled to make things better.
But it's always about coming from character, right? Like that's what Jim started creating. He's a performer. It's coming from character. Always talk about, when I worked at Henson, characters being created from the inside out, and that starts with you guys. And we think a lot about how characters are first friends to kids. Because when I was little, my first friend was Grover. That's for sure. So I think we did think about that a lot, Johnny. Like, there'll be a lot of children with these shorts who have never met the Fraggles before. Now their parents were excited, but like they need to meet Gobo and Red and Moki and all the characters as new friends and like want to play with them. And that was amazing. I really feel like you guys really succeeded with that.
Well, I want to hear, Johnny, about your how it feels to be playing Gobo Fraggle. And what I've read is that you were this massive Fraggle fan growing up, and it inspired you to become a puppeteer. So what is all of that like, and how does it feel to take on a character like that was performed by the legendary Jerry Nelson?
Well, let me say it is still not real to me. It's still very surreal to play Gobo. I don't give the whole story, but when I was 7 years old, my mother and I were on a trip down to Tennessee on a bus. My parents had gotten divorced, and my mom and I were on our own. And we stayed at a hotel that had free HBO, which was a big deal back in the 80s. Not everyone had HBO, so the free HBO was a big deal. And I can literally vividly see the image of her turning on the TV and turning on HBO, and there was Fraggle Rock. And the very first thing I saw was Gobo. It was a shot of Gobo talking, I think, to Moki. And I can't describe it. It was just like an instantaneous understanding that I was supposed to watch the show. And from there on, I became completely in love with it and obsessed with it and wanted to be a puppeteer. And Dave and Karen and Jerry and Richard and Steve and Kathy and everyone, they were all my heroes. You know, I was like, I want to be part of that. And so when I was growing up, people would say to me, well, what's your dream job? And the honest to God truth is I'd always say, oh, it doesn't exist anymore. Oh, someone's calling me. And they say, what do you mean it doesn't exist? And I'd say, oh, my dream job is to work on Fraggle Rock, but it doesn't exist anymore. And I really meant that. I really, that was all I wanted to do, was work on Fraggle Rock. And so till years and years later, when Fraggle Rock was doing its
say it's really like emotional.
No, and I swear to you, it's true. My mom loves to tell the story about you know, me coming into the kitchen at 8 years old and literally looking her in the eye with like a Fraggle Rock puppet I'd made, like a sock puppet, and being like, just so you know, when I'm 18, I'm going to move to New York City and work for the Muppets and work for Jim Henson. Thanks. Like, I was like, so sure. So I just always knew that was what I wanted to do. And anyway, so for the 30th anniversary of Fraggle Rock, Jerry Nelson had passed away, and they wanted to bring Gobo back, and I got the chance to audition. And I don't know. To me, it's like the most full circle thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I got to work with Jerry on Sesame Street. He was Gobo. You know, he was this musical leader, the coolest guy in the room, and the warmest, most loving person, and so encouraging, and so like he had a coolness to him that is, you can't even put into words. But he just was. You know, he played guitar. He, like, everything Gobo was Jerry. And I think that's why it's daunting to perform it, to be totally honest with you, is because just from my own personal observation of Jerry, he was Gobo, Gobo was Jerry. He sounded like Jerry. So it's not just doing Gobo's voice, it's almost doing Jerry's voice, which is really hard. He had such a specific sound and specific way of talking. I think the one thing that I've been able to hopefully glam onto a little bit was the wonderful Canadian accent he gave Gobo. That was kind of like an open door, like, oh, okay, so if he says a game and he says a and all these little things and that great pingy voice that Jerry has. But I just honestly, like, it's still very surreal to me. And I just feel like I'm carrying the torch. I feel very like I'm getting a chance to carry on a legacy that Jerry created, and I'm getting to live my 7-year-old dreams. And it's a great honor. I get choked up talking about it because it means a lot to me.
Well,
and you've been doing it beautifully.
I was going to say that, again, going back to Barbara's original question, these characters do come from inside. They come from inside us, inside the writers, inside Jim, and inside the workshop, people who make the puppets and design them, and Michael Frith. You know, all these people, it comes from inside everybody. And so it always is daunting to think of somebody else carrying on a character. It's, you know, in fact, I always think, well, that's just impossible. That'll never happen. Yeah. And the first time I heard Johnny do this, I thought, well, he's partway there, but it's not Jerry. And now it's getting real close. It's really looking good. And I don't know if Jan Nelson is watching, his wife, but I hope she gets to see these things. I'll contact her and make sure she sees them, because I think she would see this as a nice tribute to Jerry from Johnny. And I think Jerry would feel that way too.
Thank you. So much.
You know, it's you know, the question is always asked about why it is that these sort of Jim Henson creations are the things that stand the test of time, so much more than really anything out there does. And I think the answer to that is in this conversation that we've been having about how much of people's selves are put into this, and the inspiration that they evoke, and all of that. There's such a power there that is so unique that you really don't find with other, and that's why they keep coming back, you know, and why they're such avid fans.
Well, you know, I think it's truth. We're always looking for truth. What the character says, how a character moves, everything the character does in a story has got to be reflective of their particular truth and the truth of the story. The story has to be true. It has to be about real things. It's one of the reasons Fraggle is one of my favorite projects ever. It's right up there on the top level because it was about something, you know, it was about something.
Yeah.
I also think that I've thought about this a lot. I think that I have this whole theory that Jim Henson's creative process is embedded in the lyrics of the Rainbow Connection. And so I would just say the lovers, the dreamers, and you. The you part, I think, is what's unique, and that is that the audience gets to actually participate in the magic, because the audience knows they're puppets, but this incredible performers and writers bring these characters to life, and we, the audience, participate in the magic of making it real.
Mhm.
So we're like part of it.
Yeah.
And that is very unique.
Yeah. And I will just say in that context, because there's, about 600 people out there that are watching, and it's all part of it. I mean, there's so much about the fan community that is, there's a very thin veil, really. You know what I mean? It's all very, very connected.
Earlier on, I saw something at the bottom of the screen said, field trip to the hotel in Toronto.
Dave, you started a movement.
Oh.
Yeah, well, you know what? Johnny and I are fans, and here we are. We are fans, and now here we are. So fans out there, like we're all constantly being a part of it, right? Whether
It's amazing, and I think this was reflected in the guests that worked on the show, the human guests, that a lot of people come to events where we appear as 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, whatever, 45-year-olds, I don't know what the ages are exactly, but they want their kids to see what they had when they were little. Yeah. And that's just it's so heartwarming. I mean, I have heroes from when I was little, Howdy Doody and Beanie and Cecil. Those are just icons to me. And I think it's really wild to think that there are people who feel that way about what we did on Fraggle.
Well, and what's funny about TV too is it's such an insular thing, because you're in a studio. Usually, in our case, we were in our living rooms, but usually you're in a studio, and there's a crew that you see every day, and there's these cameras, and you put this love and heart into this work that goes into a camera, and then you kind of go, okay, and it goes out there, and you're not, you don't know who's watching, you don't know who's listening, and all of a sudden you see the impact it has when something like Fraggle Rock or even these shorts air all over the world, and you see the audience, and I think it actually reminds you, and I think this is what Jim Henson knew so deeply, the responsibility that media has. I 100% know without a shred of doubt in my body that part of what shaped the person I am is Fraggle Rock. The lessons I learned both consciously and unconsciously. I know that my awareness of environmentalism, my awareness of the beauty of diversity and tolerance, all those things that were embedded. So much of that came from that show and from Jim's work. And I think that's, I wish everything that we put out there in the world of television and film and in the business did that, but we're so lucky that I think that we get that opportunity. And I think that you see Dave and Karen now, you guys and everyone who worked in the original get to see the power of what they did that might have just lived in a studio for a short amount of time. Now it's this universally beloved thing. I think it's incredible.
It was such an honor to be a part of that, like 40 years ago, and then to get a chance to again just do this other little bit to touch on it again, and just see how it's reaching people and hopefully comforting people and giving them hope, and just with more understanding of how much it is really touching people. So it's
the perfect time to bring the Fraggles back to this world.
Well, you know what? You're right. I think they are needed more now than they were when we made them.
Yeah.
The world needs this kind of sense of diversity and appreciation.
Connected.
I mean, I was going to key off what Johnny said there, which was that, well, the influence that Jim had on probably all of us was that he dragged us all over the world and into unusual situations that we weren't familiar with. I found myself working in London and Germany and lots of other places, and everything was unfamiliar, and I made friends everywhere, and I found that we everybody's the same, and it was a real lesson to me to not think in terms of the other people from other places, because everybody has the same wants and needs and desires and dreams, and getting out there and having friends all over the place from doing our work was wonderful, but it was great to have it be part of the message of Fraggle Rock.
Yeah. And the international perspective of that, which was so great with the original
Mhm.
series, and just wrapping it around the context from those locations, and the fact that this new show is everywhere, and everyone's watching it. And it's great to talk about that in this context, because the programming we do at the museum in New York is in New York, and we have a lot of international visitors, and people come to see us from all over the world, and they come to see lots of things that we have there on exhibit or in our theaters, but of course our ongoing Jim Henson exhibition. But when we do these online programs, there are people literally from all over the world watching at the same time. So that's hugely exciting. I want to leave us a few moments to answer some audience questions, but before that, I thought we might invite on a couple of special guests just very briefly, and I will ask this guy to invite your friends on. This is not a puppet.
I think,
This is
Dave.
a
You're freaking me out. This is scaring me. What are you doing with my body?
Sorry.
Oh, hey
Boober?
there.
I'm gonna disappear
Oh,
now.
hi, everyone.
Hey, Boober.
goodness.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Hey, look
Hey,
at all
Red.
these silly creatures.
yeah, all these silly
Oh,
creatures are trapped
silly
in boxes.
creatures.
They're all
Yeah,
trapped in boxes. Oh,
they're
boy.
having a box party.
Hi, Gobo. Hi,
Yeah.
Red. So nice to see you. Look at them. They're so beautiful.
Oh, yeah, we should, yeah.
Somebody just said, "I love you, Red."
Oh,
I'm
Wow.
starstruck.
Oh,
you don't
Oh my
typically have
gosh,
them next to
there's
you
so many.
in your house, right? It's not. That's a little bit out of the ordinary, having them right next to you from where you live. It's
Yeah.
Surreal.
Johnny's dream. It's his dream to have Gobo there next
mean,
to him.
It's weird to have made versions of a Gobo puppet at 6 and 7, 8 years old, and then all of a sudden like have the real one here. It's a little freaky. I definitely don't. I'm not used to it for sure.
Here I am.
Amazing. Oh my God.
And it's not so much about the shop. We should say that the puppet builders who built these puppets. I mean, they're works of art. They're so incredibly beautiful. They also were operating at the
Yes.
highest level of their talent.
And it
Really?
is.
Oh my God.
It is in some cases the same puppet builders who built the originals that are building them for this new iteration as well, right?
Yeah, Raleigh Crusen's out there right now, and she built.
Raleigh,
Raleigh's the best.
like
Yes.
Red is a Stradivarius between Michael Fritz's design and Raleigh's building. What are
Yeah.
you talking
Oh.
about? This is very confusing. I don't understand.
Yeah, cover your
what's
ears,
going on
Red.
here.
You're talking silly
Yeah,
creatures. Don't
yeah.
listen.
But it's just like a beautiful musical instrument where you just think something and it happens. Yeah.
It is, it's worth saying something about the Muppet Workshop, the best puppet makers in the world. And they're just such a joy. And I'll start naming some, but I can't possibly name them all. It was Bonnie Erickson, Raleigh Crusen, Carolee Wilcox. Those three were on your webisode
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago. But it just goes on and on and on. Tim Clark and
Miller.
Dan Rosenthal and who?
Lady.
Who? Oh, John Lovelady. Yeah. I mean, Don
Yeah,
Saline,
yeah.
on and on. Now it's bad because if anybody's watching is in the workshop and I didn't say their name, it's not good.
Those are all silly creature names, right, Dave?
What's that?
Those are all silly creature names, right? Not
No,
Fraggle.
that's right. No, Gobo.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry.
You must be terrified out here. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm not sure what these words are, but I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah, but we have just an amazing group. And they're so talented and they're so dedicated. And every puppet is just a work of love. And
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
they're just beautifully detailed. If you ever get a chance to see a museum like MoMI or the traveling show from MoMI,
Mhm.
it's worth going because they're works of
Yeah.
art. You see, there are lots of puppets on exhibit in both shows, and they are just beautiful.
They
It's
really-
it's hard to stand still that long.
Sorry for making you stay still for so long. And
That's okay.
we hope you're comfortable there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a doozer stick, I'm happy.
So we have a couple of audience questions. I don't think we have any questions for Gobo or Red,
Okay,
but maybe.
Bye, then.
I gotta go up and coach some rock hockey. So
Yeah.
you silly creatures have
story.
fun.
Yes.
Nice
Bye,
seeing ya.
everyone.
Bye.
So here's some questions that we have. Someone wants to know how, or a few people want to know how the production team connected with the celebrities to join the show. What was that selection like? Were they breaking down your door? You know, how did you decide who to go to ask to be part of the show?
Good question, and it gives me a nice opportunity to do an incredible shout out to Apple, to Tara Sorensen, to Tamara Hunter and casting at Apple, and David Taylor and Jennifer Smuckler in Apple Music. They were an incredible partner on these shorts, and together we would generate lists, we'd talk about who we loved, and then together we'd all go out after them. I mean, they really helped us go out after many of these celebrities. And then some of them, John Tartaglia would just text. He would just text Neil Patrick Harris. He's like, I'm just gonna try. But so it was just different ways of going out to them, but every single one of them was thrilled to be asked. And we
have to say also, we should mention Tiffany Haddish. You know, there was a clip of her talking about, she was, during quarantine, she was binge watching Fraggle Rock, and she told Ellen. And literally, I texted Halle, I was like, Tiffany Haddish is talking about Fraggle Rock. And
give her a call.
We asked her and she was like, yes, I'm on board. Like, it was, the love of Fraggle Rock was so.
But there's something about this quarantine that kind of like evened everybody out. Like Johnny and I just would go for it on the phone with the celebrities. We just talked to them like people. And then I would always text Johnny, bring out Gobo, have Gobo say hi, have Gobo say hi. And the minute Gobo came out there,
he was definitely your closer, for sure.
He was the closer.
Right. Someone had a question. This is a good technical question, because if you know something about how the puppeteers typically work, they're puppeteering and watching a monitor to see how their puppeteer appears on screen. So when you're shooting using iPhone 11s, are you also watching it at the same time? How does that work?
Yeah.
Yes, we set them set it up selfie style. So we would be looking at just like right now. I've got my iPhone 11 right now. So that would be our camera and our monitor all together. Which
is very different because usually we're looking down, which helps get your head out of the shot. So that's difficult. Yeah. So you're going to look up at a monitor, which I can't tell you many times. I was like, my head's at the shot. But also it's mirrored. And one of the arts of working with a monitor is, and it's something that takes a long time to get used to, but when your puppet turns right on the monitor, it looks like it's going left. And you have to, it's something you train for years to do. Yeah. And all of a sudden using an iPhone, you're almost like doing it mirror style again, which you think would be easier, but your brain has gotten so used to doing opposites that you're like, it took a little while to get used to that for sure.
Mm.
That's great. Here's another question. To Karen and Dave, asking how did it feel to step back into these characters after all of these years? It was quite a long hiatus. So did you have like a getting to know you again?
No, it's easy.
Just like riding a bike.
They're part of us.
It's something has always been there with me for 40 years. So it was just like a warm hug. And I've been lucky over the years with promoting recent like DVD releases and doing appearances at conventions where I've been able to do things with Red, and like the music video we did a few years ago. So there've been bits and pieces of times over the last few decades where I've still been able to do Red. But this is the first time it's really been this extensive, and to really get into a full cast of the other characters and telling little stories and getting into the music. It's been wonderful.
I was just happy to hear Boober's laugh again, because I'm obsessed with the way Boober laughs. And Dave broke it down for me. And what did you say, Dave? Like, he just can't let it out.
It fights its way out of him. He does everything he can to avoid it.
It's the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yes.
He's so choked.
I think I cried, laughed on Zoom the first time he did that at a read-through. I was like, that is the best thing that's ever happened in my life.
It's so much fun. It's just human folly. It's human foibles, Mm-hmm. That's really what these characters are made out of. In my case, they're made out of my flaws. And it's a therapeutic thing. You take a part of yourself that's not working very well, and you make it into a character, and you try to find a way to love it. You know?
Well, that's I mean, that's art, right?
Yeah,
that's
it is art. You're right.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know, or several people want to know apparently, where the cave background came from. How was that?
That's funny. Well, when we realized we had to shoot on blue screen, you know, because we just didn't have the ability to build physical set pieces. Luckily, there's a whole bunch of slide shots that were taken from the original series of the original caves, just for archive purposes. And so we pulled some of those, and luckily our amazing editor and DP and producer worked together to find the best ones. And you know, you'll see like behind Moki is a shot of Red and Moki's room. We tried to find different, you know, different things that looked right. And then, you know, the case of like Gobo and Wembley's room, we just used, you know, brand new looking caves to try to make that look a little bit fresher, because we didn't have a shot that really showed off the room very well. So.
Right. And I guess this is a last question, because we're, believe it or not, at time. There's a question here, and it's something I also kind of wanted to close with, which was thinking like of the spirit of the original Fraggle Rock, which was obviously so different, right? There were doozers and gorgs, and it was more elaborate, and it wasn't from separate rooms, and it was very, very different, right? But the spirit remains there. So what consciously, what aspects of the Fraggle spirit or Fraggle philosophy did you make sure to import into this very different format?
I'll let you guys
Well,
take it on too.
Connection was the big thing in the original series. It's almost something that the characters gradually kind of evolved and learned over the course of the series, that all these other characters that were out there, there were kind of hidden connections that they would slowly become aware of. And for this series of shorts, it was just kind of ramped up. The Fraggles go from just connecting with each other to you know, making first contact with some silly creatures, and then exploring that a bit more, and then through those connections, just getting insights and appreciation for others. So just capturing some of what we had in the original series in this has been really, really special.
Yeah, it's kind of all congruent with what Rodney King says. Why can't we all just get along?
Yeah, and it's also about, I think a big thing was that last episode of Fraggle Rock sticks with me, when Marjorie the Trash Heap says, "You cannot leave the magic." And I love that. I've always taken that with me, and I think that there is that feeling of like, we're just going back to spend time with friends. Like, I think something Halle and I talked a lot about was, we have to be able to help, as Halle was saying earlier, like kids who don't know the characters. So there was a little bit of like finding ways to drop little nuggets in there of who these characters are. But we wanted to make it feel like we're just picking back up with really good friends. And the wealth of who these characters are, it's so full and so rich already. It wasn't a big stretch to say, you know, after the Fraggles have dealt with cave-ins and so many other difficult subjects on the show, their love and their optimism and their want to take care of each other felt like the right thing to do for this. So it was kind of a natural fit to pick up with the Fraggles at this time in this situation where we all want to connect. We all want to feel optimistic. We want to feel some sort of hope. And we're all using music and gardening, actually very Fraggly things, music and gardening and cooking and things that the Fraggles kind of love. We're using that right now to make ourselves feel better. Yeah.
And dancing.
Yeah, and I would say that it's that feeling that you feel when you watch the Fraggles. That's what we wanted to keep up, like the joy, you're having fun, how music makes you feel, when people feel like they want to get up and dance and sing while they watch them. So all those Fraggle feelings, I feel like we tapped into thanks to Karen, Dave, and Johnny, and then sort of deliver it in these shorts. So I hope the Fraggle feeling, everyone was feeling it.
We should say that the last episode on this coming Tuesday, that was the big goal, was to really kind of, you know, everyone who's watched these first 5 shorts, to kind of really give them a great Fraggly finale. So hopefully you'll feel that.
A lot of silly creatures, a lot of singing.
A lot of singing.
The season finale. What will happen on the season finale? Well, listen, you guys, it's I can't wait to tune in to that last episode, and I know it's going to leave me hungry for more Fraggles. So I hope we see more of them. It was not enough. So
Well,
really
there was not
appreciate
much chance
that.
of that. The thing about Fraggle Rock was it was this international program with international co-productions. Nothing could be done that way today. It was so expensive for its time. And you know, the way the internet and streaming has changed television, it's very hard to get that kind of a budget. I mean, we've just for years just thought, oh, you could never make Fraggle Rock again. Would
Well,
be great, because I think the world's ready for it.
The
Yeah,
world, I mean,
People want it.
people want it. There's a lot of fans out there, and our world is crazier than ever, and that lovely controlled, sort of uncontrolled silliness, craziness that Jim described for Fraggle Rock, how it was silly and wonderful. We could all use a lot more of that. So thank you so much for bringing it back in this way that kind of met this moment head on. I mean, it's truly extraordinary, honestly.
And thank you to the fans. The Fraggle fans are the best fans. Like, I mean,
Thank you.
everyone who's watching,
100%.
like, it wouldn't
Thank you,
have happened.
Fraggle fans, for keeping that magic going.
It is the secret. Thank you guys for joining us and for being such good friends to the museum, and thanks for everyone out there watching and coming together as a community. It's my favorite way to spend a Saturday evening. I really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your stories, and look forward to talking with you again.
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank
It was
you.
really fun. Great to see everybody too.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks so
everybody.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.